Welcome back to the Home Front Live. I am your host, Reed Galen. Today, I am joined by Lee Drutman. Let me just go through Lee's incredible resume. He is a senior fellow in the Political Reform Program at New America. He is the author of Breaking the Two-Party Doom Loop, The Case for Multi-Party Democracy in America, and The Business of America is Lobbying. Also, I think a new book out, right, Lee? We Need a New Party? That just came out last year. He is
Oh,
the
that
winner
was
of...
that was a special edition of the Boston Review, a special symposium. We need more parties. So I
Okay.
guess that gets classified as a book on Amazon. Uh,
Okay. Well, then, yeah. After all these years, I'm still confused by the internet. He is a co-founder of Fix Our House, a campaign for proportional representation in the United States, a co-founder of the Center for Ballot Freedom, and a lecturer at the Johns Hopkins University Center for Advanced Governmental Studies. Lee, welcome.
hey, great to be with you, Reed.
So, Lee, I think the first time you and I met was years ago, probably when the Two-Party Doom Loop book came out. I think it was a very nice to do at the maybe at the Metropolitan Club in Washington D.C.
Oh
And that
yeah,
was when I was in the depths of my my third partiness. I was like, this is broken. If the two choices we had were Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and we got Donald Trump, then everything must be broken. And then I went on to try and start a third party at the Serve America movement. We got ballot access in exactly one state, which 2 months after achieving it, the New York legislature went and made it almost impossible for us to keep it. And then I went to work for a couple of other people. But tell us, the reason why this is back at the top of so many folks' minds is because none other than Elon Musk, formerly of Doge, of Tesla, of rockets that can't take off, and of $400 billion, has said he's going to start the America Party. So give us a sense of what you think that means.
well, your guess might be as good as mine, but based on what he's said, he seems to want to do something that's disruptive to our two-party system. His views have generally tended towards the techno-libertarian, disruptive, little bit all over the ideological map. He was a Democrat, then he was a MAGA booster. Now he's neither. So I'm not exactly sure what his political beliefs are, but I think like a lot of people who are frustrated with the two-party system, he feels that neither of the two parties really captures what he thinks the country ought to be doing. So he has $400 billion. So that's real money, I think. And money is the most fungible resource in politics.
Yes, and like water, right? Money in politics always finds a way. And so I think, Lee, it's important just to give the folks watching. We'll take a step back. So the reason why it's so hard to start a new party in the United States is 100% on purpose, which is the two parties we've had, the Democrats, who've been in one way or another, I think, around since the founding of the Republic, and the Republicans, who have been around since 1854, do not want competition. They have made that very clear. And in fact, it's probably that and campaign finance reform or lack thereof are probably the only two things that probably still bring them together.
Yes, they don't like other parties getting in the game that they control. They both have a monopoly on opposition to each other, and that's pretty powerful. So, yeah, I mean, functionally, we have a two-party system, not because Americans want only two parties. We've seen in polls for decades now that overwhelming majorities of Americans say there ought to be more than two parties, but rather because we have an electoral system, single winner elections, that makes it very hard for third parties to compete without being spoilers and wasted votes. So all of the energy and money and attention goes to the two major parties. Uh, that's the major reason, but also there are other structural barriers. Ballot access is restricted for minor parties. Campaign finance rules tend to privilege the major parties. But largely it is this electoral system, this single winner plurality system of elections that makes it really hard for third parties to get in the game meaningfully.
And so, look, we have seen things like open primaries in places like California and Washington State. Everybody is still all abuzz about the outcome of ranked choice voting in the Democratic primary in New York City. I think Maine has that as well now. So there have been some nibbling around the edges of how to increase pressure. I guess the predicate is, if we're going to have two parties, let's try and force the two parties through electoral mechanisms, choose people who are more broadly acceptable to a larger piece of the electorate. Am I right about that?
I think that's the theory. Now, the practice of that, uh, I think, falls way
Right.
short of the theory. And I mean, even like, I mean, let's we can. I think it's worth spending a moment, because I think a lot of folks who are tuning in might think, "Oh, open primaries and ranked choice voting. Oh, well, that's a path forward, because those reforms have gotten a lot of
Right.
popularity." Now, ranked choice voting. I was a big enthusiast of ranked choice voting when I first learned about it. I've spent a few years saying, "Oh, man, this is an experiment worth trying." And then we started to get a lot of social science research, a lot of evidence around how ranked choice voting was working. And I came away from all of those studies feeling like, this doesn't really do anything.
Mm,
Doesn't really change any outcomes. Doesn't really. I mean, you look at Maine, where now they've had it since 2018. I don't see a large third party movement in Maine gaining traction. I mean, Alaska, I don't see third parties. I mean, other than that, they've sort of always had a big independent presence, although Alaska has a kind of sui generis political culture. I just don't see, looking study after study, that ranked choice voting makes any uh, real effect on who wins, who loses, you know, who uh, who runs. There's no evidence it changes policy outcomes. So, I mean, sure, you could say maybe it needs longer run, but reality is, it just seems like, as you said, real nibbling around some real edges. And you mentioned this, say, oh, people need broad support. I think a lot of folks who look at ranked choice voting, one of the arguments that gets made over and over again is, oh, we really need majority winners in this country. Well, I think actually the problem is that we have so many super majority winners, because we have so many districts and elections that are so lopsided for one
right.
party or the other. I just don't see this huge crisis of plurality winners. I mean, every now and then there's somebody who wins with 47, 48% of the vote. But if the goal is to try to ensure, broad majority support, I think we already have that. The problem is we have districts that are so lopsided that they're not even contested in many cases. And that's where we get to the issue of proportional representation in multi-member districts. Um,
Now, Washington State has that, right? So, can you explain what that means to us, just for because
So
even sometimes I get
Washington
confused.
State, yeah, I know it's so confusing, because there's all these different primary systems, and even what open primaries is. So, Washington State and California both have a top two primary, which is essentially a two-round, not open, nonpartisan primary, where the first round is everybody runs in the same primary: Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, and then the top two finishers go on to the general election and compete against each other. Now, the idea when California put this in place was that it was
Which
going
I
to
helped
moderate
pass,
politics.
FYI.
Oh, all right. Well, so you can speak to the logic behind it even more than I can. But I think the idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that you'd get some Democrat on Democrat races, some Republican on Republican races, and in those races, the more moderate of the two
Right.
partisans would probably win. And to some extent, that is, I'd say on the margins that has happened. But I've looked at a lot of studies now, been since 2010, and I think it, like RCV, it's another reform that, showed some promise at the start, but I think has underperformed the expectations study after study. I mean, part of the problem is there's just not as many R on R, D on D races as you'd expect, because people sometimes drop out. Uh, when you have orphaned voters who feel like, it's Democrat versus Democrat, and I'm a Republican, and they're both
They
terrible.
just stay
I
home.
don't want to vote
Right.
for either of them. And you see that in study after study. So, again, nibbling at the margins, sure. Maybe, you know, a few studies suggest that maybe there's some tiny effects there. But, it's not like California politics has suddenly depolarized.
Mm. Well, even in California, just as an aside, you now have the Democrats are the first by voter registration as parties. No party preference. NPP is now second, and the Republicans are third. But what the practical effect of that, Lee, is that you now have progressive Democrats and the business Democrats, right? So they've sort of sorted on their own lines, even inside their own party. And now we see, as you said, a lot of Republican versus Republican, a lot of Democrat versus Democrat. Again, anybody can run in a primary, but again, that R or D, as I have said, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is such a powerful shorthand for so long that when people see I or NPP or anything that doesn't say R or D, my sense is it's just like, I don't know what that means. These, at least I have a sense of what it's supposed to stand for. So I'll go with one of those. And I want to get back to this in a second, if I even decide to show up.
Yeah, if I even decide to show up, and I think this is one of these things where just a lot of people are just so checked out of this and talk about like, oh, we need to get more people voting in primaries, but regardless of the rules, primary turnout remains extremely low. I think you've hit on something that is incredibly important, which is that parties are labels that are shortcuts, right? Like, I go to the store, I buy some milk. I'd like to see a label on that because I'd like to know what's inside of it.
Hmm.
Am I getting whole milk? Am I getting skim milk? Am I getting expired milk? Is it organic? Right? Like labels are useful shortcuts. I'm not gonna like take the milk home and like do a lab
Oh,
test to see what's in it.
right. Hope it's
Uh,
still good. Right.
I hope it's still good. I mean, I guess I can smell it. And if it smells sour, then I know to toss it out. But maybe I can't do that until I get home, and then I've already bought it. So, I mean, the point
Exactly.
is that Reed, you and I, and probably most of the people who are tuning in, are the real weirdos in this country that we actually obsess about politics and think about it a lot and know a lot about it. Most people, it's something that they tune into now and then, especially around elections, but mostly, they don't care about it all that much. It doesn't seem to affect their lives. They're upset about it. They feel like it's not working. That we have a tremendous negativity bias in the news that we consume about it because of the way
Right.
our media structure works these days. But the party labels tell us something about what it is that we are supporting. I mean, if you've ever voted in a local election, I mean, at a national level, you sort of know who the candidates are because you're following them, other than your partisanship kicks in. But like, I don't know who these people are. But if it's the Democrat or the Republican, I have a good sense of what they stand for. If it's the Independent or the some party I've never heard of, I don't know who this person is.
Right.
Has anybody vetted them? Uh, what do they stand for? I don't know.
Right. And that's that again. So you have a situation where you had Coke or Pepsi for the better part of 170 years, right? More than
You mean
170
you
years.
mean in that they're basically the same, and now it's like orange juice versus diesel fuel.
Well, I mean, look, there's so many other ways. I mean, look, you have Steve Bannon call it the Uniparty, right? There are other people. We have, how many times have we called it the duopoly, right? And to your point, there are a couple of things that you said I want to break down a little bit. One is, does it even matter? Right. So people don't show up at all. Neither one of these parties does anything. And I saw that personally, anecdotally, when I went out and knocked on doors last fall. Is that it doesn't, my life wasn't better under X. It's not better. It's not worse under Y. What difference does it
Right.
make? In the
Right.
2022 midterms, turnout was 44%. Even turnout, I think, by percentage was down last year. And if you could get those people to participate, say at 5% higher, 10% higher. Would anything change? I don't know. But we have all these different pieces, which is apathy, antipathy, disconnectedness, not just from politics, but from just about anything in civic or civil life. And so all of these things sort of pile up on top of each other. So you've got two parties that don't want any competition with all these rules that they put together with nibbling around the edges. I'll tell you this, you can appreciate this, I think. So I was on the phone after the election last year, Lee, with a reform group. And that's the one thing I've found about the reformers is, and maybe this is my vestigial republicanism or campaign guy stuff coming out, is they're really good people, which I appreciate. Um,
Yeah, they are really
the
are not.
problem they are. The problem is that what I tried to explain to them is you are by definition an insurgency and you don't act like it, right? You act like, oh, well, we just want to get along with everybody. We want to give voters more choices. When the two baddest guys on the block are like, if you come anywhere near this, right, like we're going to sock you in the face. And they're like, oh, we're going to get it done through the legislature. Like, really? Really? You're going to get this done through a legislature who has no interest whatsoever, right, in helping you? And then it's like, well, ballot measures are the last way we want to do things. I'm like, yes, but as someone who ran more ballot measures than I can remember, and also somebody who does not believe that direct democracy is a great way to run a railroad, it's oftentimes the only way you can do it. And look, when we passed Prop 11 in California, I don't remember, that might have been redistricting reform, right? Like the Republicans and the Democrats hated us, right? Like we passed 50.5 to 49.5, right? We just barely got it over the line because both parties actually ran ads together to try and kill it. It didn't work. But again, just barely. And that to me is the other is that so you have all of this wreckage that sort of piles up on top of each other. I just want to go to another piece of it too, which is, you wrote a book about lobbying. People like, does any of it make a difference anyway? People say, I'm going to go to Washington, I'm going to change Washington, and they either don't change it or it changes them, or you got someone like a Donald Trump who says, I'm going to change things, and he starts changing things, and people are like, wait, I didn't want that. So tell us from your perch here now, mid-year 2025, where is the third party movement? What do you think we could or should do now? I have an idea, but I want to hear yours first.
All right. So I think first off, we need, before we say what we should do, we need to take a little bit of a landscape analysis where we are, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, if I track these, public opinion polls about, feelings towards the parties, feelings towards alternative parties, feeling towards the system, and what I see is that the uh, faith in the existing two parties is as low as it's ever been in the history of polling going back to the 1940s. Back then, most people were pretty satisfied with the two-party system when polling began, and it's sort of been on a steady decline since. And now you have overwhelmingly people don't feel Democrats are fighting for them. People don't feel that Republicans are fighting for them. People feel the system is fundamentally broken. People feel the system fundamentally needs change. I mean, there is just a screaming sound from every public opinion poll. Something needs to change. This isn't working. And, I think that the Democratic Party is, really quite delusional at this moment. I think the Democratic Party has did tremendous disservice in the 2024 campaign by basically covering up Biden's declining cognitive ability, even though people could see that in front of them by saying, "Oh, the economy's great. The economy's great." What's that high price? Don't just, don't trust your eyes, trust us. And I think there is now a tremendous dissatisfaction among people who traditionally vote for Democrats with the Democratic Party leadership. Uh, and that maybe Democrats will, lurch back into a House majority just by virtue of people feeling like Republicans have gone
Right.
too
They're
far.
the other guy. Right. Yeah.
It's monopoly on opposition. I mean, we're watching the Republican Party in power lurch to this sort of point of insane nihilism almost. It's just destruction for the purpose of destroying things. Uh, I don't understand what the ideology is. Just it's just
Well, you're
the
assuming there is one, so
yeah. Well,
don't
that's
worry
that. I
about
mean,
that.
it's it's just it's it's like
It's it, look it's it that ideology, as I said in a video last week, is the leader principle. Whatever the leader wants, that's what the movement
yeah,
wants.
yeah. There's
And so
nothing.
there's no, yeah, it's not really that. And then there are
And
true believers within it, but like that, broadly speaking, it's if the boss wants it, we want it.
the my wife recently reminded me of a Stephen King horror story, which was later made into a movie called The Langoliers, which is there's just these uh, uh, mouse in the sky that just eat everything and they leave nothingness in their wake, and that has become an image for me of what the current Republican Party is. And if folks are watching this at home, they should and forget there's somewhat forgettable horror, maybe just somewhat forgettable horror film in the '80s, but the Google images are just amazing of what that movie was.
I have to write that
So
down
yeah, it's
because I'm sure it'll come in handy in something I write soon.
yeah, please use it. So, and people are saying, well, what else? What else is there? And the answer is nothing, because in our system, the way the electoral rules are set up, it's very hard for a third party to gain any purchase because they just become a spoiler, or a wasted vote. So now enter Elon Musk. Uh, there was one idea about what that third party should be, the America Party. Not again, we started this with what is the America Party? I don't know. We will see. But to the extent that I've seen a strategy outlined, it seems like the sensible disruption strategy, which is run spoiler candidates and a handful of Senate races, run other candidates, a handful of House races, and you could control the balance, and then you have tremendous power. That's always been this sort of vulnerability of our two-party system on a knife's
Right.
edge is that,
The so-called fulcrum strategy, which is if you had
yeah,
4 or 5 otherwise unaligned members of, say, the U.S. Senate, then everything would theoretically have to go through
right,
them as a block, or maybe 10 or, well, even now it could be 7 or 8 or 9 members of the U.S. House because the margins have been so close.
right. So you could, so in theory, what Dan Osborne almost managed to pull off in in Nebraska, which is that he ran as an independent candidate and no Democrat won or ran. He almost won. Yeah, but you imagine, a handful of states where, you run somebody who's an independent, not a Republican. Democrats don't run, or vice versa. States that are, within, just beyond reach for the opposition party, like a state like Iowa or Ohio. Now, the problem and the reason that's hard to do is because you have Democrats sitting around in Ohio and Iowa saying, "Oh, this is going to be a good year for Democrats. Hold on, it's my turn. Why would I step aside and let somebody
Right.
else run
Well, listen,
in an
it doesn't
independent?"
have to be. It doesn't have to be in just states that are theoretically close. I found that that's in a place like Idaho, where I think Democrats are clocking in at approximately 12% registration in the state. They have the same opinion, so I think it's maybe a broader psychosis
Yeah,
than
I
just
think it's
numbers.
don't replace us. I mean, yeah, I mean, does
Right.
Evan McMullen, came close in your home state of Utah. Uh,
Right.
it was within Democrats' step down, but it is a don't step in on our territory thing. So you
Right.
can either Democrats could step aside or Republicans could step aside in some places, and where they don't have a chance and let a third party run. You could do what Musk seems to be doing, which is potentially even running. I don't care, who wins, Democrats or Republicans. I mean, think back to the last really big third party presidential run, Ross Perot. Perot got 19% of the vote because there was at least 19% of the electors said, it doesn't matter, Democrats, Republicans, they're both the same, so why not take a chance? Same extent to
And in
some people.
retrospect, he was right. Actually, they were the
Yeah, I
same.
mean, 1992. I mean, what was it? H.W. Bush would be a probably be a moderate Democrat at this point.
Yeah, and Clinton would be a moderate Republican,
Yeah, right.
right?
Arkansas versus Connecticut,
Texas. Yeah,
Texas, right? I mean, but Connecticut roots.
right. But let me ask this: is the idea of what a party stands for again has been, to use a word you used, fungible over the years, right? They have flip-flopped, they have taken each other's places. The last time we had a major schism again was in the early 1850s when the Whigs could no longer sustain northern business owners versus southern slaveholders, right? They split. Republicans are able to rise, but again based on belief. And I think that's the one thing that for me is interesting, is that voters, like, they don't believe in anything, right? Too often is like, okay, well, this is who I vote for, this is who they vote for. Political socialization, how I grew up, but very little of it has any meaning because things are so skewed in favor of one particular segment of society, or one particular issue, right, that keeps people coming back. And so that's the other part too, is that the parties have really said, okay, I need to get to 50% plus one. So
Right,
how do
right.
I get just enough of my people out, and how do I ensure just enough of their people stay home?
Right. And that's I mean, there are two important points here. One is a sort of long-standing political science understanding that most people are partisans first, and to the extent that they have an ideology, it comes from the party.
Right.
Maybe 15 to 20% of people actually have a genuine ideology and worldview, and most people just follow politics and say, well, whatever my party says, they're for people like me, and it's much more of a group based dynamic. And like, I think that's actually fine. I think we tend to think everybody should be this super engaged, ideological, informed citizen.
Right.
But like, let's just face the reality of what democratic politics is. But there was a time in which the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were just much bigger tents, and there were conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans alongside liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans. So you had something more like a four-party system with a lot of overlap. So there were a lot of voters who were, well, I'm with Republicans on foreign policy, but I like, Democrats on regulation of business, or maybe the other way around.
Which
And
worked out really. I mean, from the 1950s on, it was more likely that you were going to have a Republican president, and you were always going to have a Democratic Congress.
right, and that held up until 1992.
Right.
When Bill Clinton got to the White House, and then 94 when Newt Gingrich nationalized the House elections and Republicans got back into control of the House for the first time since 1954, and they had only held it for 4 years before then. So
Yeah.
Democrats almost controlled the House entirely back to the 30s. And now we've been in this period in which every election has been increasingly narrowly contested. It's always within a few points one way or the other, a few House seats one way or the other, especially since 2010. And at the same time, even as the national elections have gotten closer, individual districts have gotten more and more lopsided. So now you're down to maybe 10% of House districts that are
Right.
genuinely competitive. So, what you have is essentially two one-party countries in which the parties so that Democrats are represented by the most liberal parts of the country. Uh,
The
Republicans are represented
coasts.
by
Right.
the most conservative parts of the country. So, you could have had liberal Republicans from New England. In Congress, you used to have conservative Democrats from, southern and plain states. But because of the winner take all system of elections, and get back to that, and we put that at the start, so we're going to pick back up on that. Uh, you essentially have Democrats giving up on a lot of parts of the country, Republicans giving up on a lot of parts of the country, and who represents that party is much more constrained by the most conservative and liberal parts of the country. So
Right.
the party coalition with a Democratic coalition with Democrats from West Virginia and South Dakota and Arkansas is very different than Democratic coalition with people with representatives only from the the most liberal
Yeah,
states.
California,
They
Oregon, New York, Connecticut, right.
Right. I mean, you only have to look at, just look at the House leadership among Democrats, right? There was a time when Dick Gephardt and Tom Daschle were the leadership. You had
Right.
Missouri and South Dakota. Uh, now it's been New York and California, in the leadership for quite a while.
But let me ask you this, because I think you wrote a piece, didn't you, say that maybe Democrats should just give up on red states? Did I read that right?
Yeah, no, I did write a piece on the board. This is the Dan Osborne strategy. Like, just let independents run. Like, Democratic brand is just toxic. And that's, that's the reality. It's really hard to turn that around in an election. And, maybe, they'll get some sort of dead cat bounce, because people don't want Republicans, or
Right.
Republicans just stay home. But, there's not a lot of enthusiasm in the electorate. And, it's just like this sense that the system doesn't work. So, the fundamental, when we, let me know when we're ready to move on to the, what do we do about it? Where does the
Well,
role of
so all right,
electoral reform?
so I'm gonna not do electoral reform right now, but I'm gonna ask a bigger question. And this is because I see some of my friends on the thread here who I know are very interested in the idea of a third party or an independent movement. Do you believe at this moment in time it is more important for political reformers to do all they can to try and stop someone like a Donald Trump? Or is it more important to say, a pox on both their houses? He is not the cause, but the symptom of a broken duopoly, a broken system of 170 years. What do you think? Because I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, I don't really like Democrats, but I really don't like Donald Trump. So I have to just sort of caucus with them or fight alongside them. But the truth is like, I don't really want to be a Democrat either.
So, I mean, I I think you can do both. But I mean, where do you think that there is a decision point that people have to make where they choose one of these two things, right? Like, I don't see these two goals as being exclusive,
Okay.
to each other. But I mean, maybe I'm not. Maybe there's a failure of my imagination to think what would a decision point be where you had to choose one of those two.
That's a good question. I don't have the answer, and I think to your point about the narrow band of people who think about this stuff on a very regular basis, um, is probably, all things considered, a handful, right, of
Hi,
people who really
everybody who
care about
thinks
it.
about this.
Right. Yeah. Thanks
I think
to the
they're all
202 of you, the
yeah.
202 of you who are worried about this as much as we are. No, but well, because I think, the decision point would be if I help Democrats get elected, if I help another Democrat get elected to the presidency, right? And that's how I'm going to spend all my time and all my energy. Do we believe that they will do anything substantively different than they have done before? One.
No, and
Secondly, and do we think that the Republican Party will ever revert to what it was when I was a kid? And I don't think I think the answer is no there too. Right. So
I mean,
the mutually exclusive piece is interesting, but I just think that most people will have, again, if you're a dedicated political, and I use this word intentionally, partisan, not R or D, but someone who has a belief and is willing to fight for it. I don't know that you have the time, the wherewithal, if you're a donor, the money to do both.
sure. Well, okay, fair enough. So it comes down to where do you invest your money? And like the Democratic campaigns don't need your money. They have so much money, and most of that money is just set on fire, as
Yes, 100%.
on stuff. I
As, so,
mean,
as someone
you
as someone who has both poured the gasoline and lit the match, I can promise you that yes, the vast majority of it is lit on fire.
and and just, can I ask you to be a bit more emphatic about how it gets lit on fire, just so that people know how much of this money that they're giving to campaigns is just essentially going up in flames?
Sure. So for example, guys, let's say that let's make the numbers easy. Let's say that a campaign raises $1 million. Okay. It doesn't matter where it is. Take it for what it's worth. Too often, you're going to have a consultant class for whom the incentives are not whether or not I can win this race or do the things necessary strategically and tactically and then operationally to win, but how can I extract as much money via either fees or commissions, i.e., you know what? Like, let's say we're running a $1 million race in Grand Rapids, Lee. Okay, I'm going to spend $750,000 on broadcast television in Grand Rapids. Do I think that's a good way to do it? I don't. Have I convinced myself and my donors and my candidate that this is the way to reach as many low information, tuned out voters as I can? I have convinced them of that. But you know what the difference is? Is that 15 cents of every dollar that I'm going to put on the air is going to go to me. Right. And that also could be in digital advertising. And so the one thing that we learned, at the Lincoln Project was like, hey, shocking, message matters, right? Like if you created a message or had a candidate that was impactful or interesting, or someone wanted to listen to that might not have otherwise ever been involved in politics, then you might have the ability to transcend how many gross rating points. Again, probably the last time that mattered as a metric in politics was 2004, 2008, maybe in a presidential campaign. But again, we are a sclerotic political class in which we're going to do the things that are best for us as opposed to what is best for the candidate, best for the party that we claim to work for, or certainly best for the people. That they come, if it's 1, 2, and 3, it's not like they're like a distant third.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the most important aspects. What you just said, Reed, is one of the most important aspects of our current political campaign environment. And I just see people are so tired of getting these constant text messages saying, "Can you just chip in some amount of money? We need to win some race that we're never going to win, or this or that." It's just it's just like people are treated like piggy banks. And I think this is part of why people, at least among my cohort of left oriented folks, like, are just so mad at the Democratic Party in this moment. It's just like,
Well,
come
it's
on,
also
like,
if you don't give us this, I mean, look, this is also like if you don't give me $5 today, I'm going to lose, right? So it's all predicated on the idea that disaster is coming, which I also,
right,
we saw some of the messaging that we were handed to, by local Democratic organizations. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. If you don't vote, it'll be the worst thing. All this other stuff, all of it predicated in reaction as opposed to here's what I will do, here's what I
right.
believe in. And then, of course, look, does negative advertising work? It does work. There's no question about it, right? I
And
have been
people
the
do it.
purveyor of, yeah, look, I have been the purveyor of more negative ads than I can remember. I mean, I said this in the last piece I wrote. The difference between marketing and politics is this. Colgate, 9 out of 10 dentists say it's the best toothpaste out there, right? That's marketing. Politics, Colgate, 9 out of 10 dentists say it's the best toothpaste out there. And did I mention that Crest makes your teeth fall out, right? That's
Right.
politics.
But
And it
politics,
works because we're hardwired to believe the negative.
sure, we have a tremendous negativity bias. I mean, this is just how our brains evolved. And especially in this moment when we can turn on our phone and be assaulted by 20 fires going on, it makes us feel like the world is constantly in crisis. And I mean, I will say, just as a broader point for the sake of liberal democracy, that it's really, really hard to maintain a liberal democracy when people feel like they are constantly under threat and everything is breaking down around them. I mean, the history of authoritarian success is predicated on this myth that everything is falling apart and you can't trust the institutions. And the intense negativity that has driven campaigns for so long has, I think, really destroyed that fundamental sense of trust and legitimacy that democratic governance requires. And that's it's like it's just like we keep fighting this trench warfare game of inches, and all we're doing is turning the entire landscape into mud.
So, all right. So we have just a few minutes left with you, and thank you so much. So, all right. So we've been in our trenches. We're looking
All
over.
right.
It's no man's land out there. So, Lee, what do we do next?
Well, we need to have a peace treaty and rebuild Europe. Not Treaty of Versailles, but more like the Marshall Plan, I think.
Right.
Uh, and I mean, it's interesting that when I think about Germany and how we rebuilt German political institutions after World War II, we actually gave them a system of modest proportional representation, which has so far in Germany held off the far right. They've got some votes, but they're not in government. Uh, and that's actually a pretty good system. A little bit of flexibility. People can vote for different parties. Parties can form coalitions. Every vote matters. And I mean, you look across Western Europe and you see there, populist far right parties that top out at about 15-20%. And then the other 80% that doesn't want them figures out how to form a coalition government and govern the country. Maybe we're in, maybe that won't last, but I actually think it will. And whereas here in the US, everything is this binary zero sum, us against them, that just drives our brains crazy and makes us feel like we're in this constant threat. And our side needs to do everything to win, and will even support this crazy authoritarian narcissist in the White House because well, at least he's owning the libs, and that's the
Right.
most important thing. And doesn't matter whether he's cutting our health care or giving tax breaks to the rich, or using the White House as a grotesque grift machine. At least the libs are mad, and that's the most
Right.
important thing because it's against them. So we've got to break out of that what I've called the two party doom loop. Now, proportional representation is the most straightforward way to do that. It's a little bit of a longer play. More immediately, there is some efforts that I'm involved in through the Center for Ballot Freedom to re-legalize fusion voting. There's a couple of
Mhm.
lawsuits in New Jersey and Kansas and Wisconsin where you have these new moderate parties that have formed. A few places where disaffected Republicans, Democrats who feel like their party has gone a little bit too far to the extreme. Well, what if we had a center party? Now, there's an acknowledgement that that center party doesn't have tremendous support, but maybe it has 5 to 10% support. And if you have a ballot line, fusion voting is where you have multiple ballot lines that can endorse the same party. So you imagine
Right.
in Wisconsin, for example, it's a close Senate race. It's Ron Kine versus Ron Johnson, say, and there's a moderate party, United Wisconsin, we'll call them, and they can choose which of those two candidates to endorse. Now, for a lot of people who might be Republicans, they don't want to vote for Ron. I don't know if Ron Kine is planning to run for Senate, but he's a moderate Democrat from
Right.
Wisconsin, who could, in theory, you know, uh, represent some moderate values, whereas there's a lot of people who say I don't vote for Democrats are terrible, but now, well, he's on the moderate party line, so you don't have to vote for the Democrat, you can vote for the
Right.
moderate party, the United Wisconsin party. Now people can have a new identity, can have a meaningful vote that actually it is essentially like this Fulcrum strategy, but just on the ballot as opposed to in Congress. And now, anybody who wants to win statewide in Wisconsin or in a close congressional district knows, well, I got to get that moderate party endorsement because if they give their ballot line to the other side, then I'm probably going to lose because they hold that 10% balance of power. So, that's a powerful intervention. It also could help, just to kind of generate some new party activity. Maybe it's like an off-dimensional party. Maybe it's like trailer park owners, uh,
Right.
or trailer park residents who feel like they're, man, neither party represents us, but we need somebody who who
Right. Cares about
who
us.
can cares about us, right? I mean, yeah, I think it's really easy for both parties to say, well, we might not be great, but look at them, they're terrible. And
Right.
it's the classic lesser of two evils. But you've never heard the phrase lesser of three evils, have you?
No. But I'm sure
Yeah,
we could come up with one. So,
there is
all right, Lee.
actually I oh, we gotta wrap up here.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. We got a couple minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying it is a martial arts movie if you Google it.
Right. All right. So, Lee, thank you so much for doing this. I hope you'll come back and have another discussion because I know that I have a lot of friends who are interested in this. And I think that there are a lot of Americans who would be open to the idea. But again, I think that the first thing is getting them to listen to anybody because they've tuned out and I can't really blame them.
Yeah.
But where can we find you? Where can we find your work before we let you go?
So since we're on Substack, I have a Substack called Undercurrent Events, and you can subscribe to it for free. And you'll get content every now and then, but it'll be good content.
Well, good
And
content is better than bad content often. I agree.
yes,
Um,
it's quality over quantity. Although I try to put out at least a post a month. And I'm on the social medias, Blue Sky, Twitter, X. You can check me out at New America. You can, if you're really interested, the Breaking the Two-Party Doom Loop is a wonderful book, and everyone should read it if they haven't already.
Awesome. As always, gang, you can find me here on Substack at the home front. I hope you will subscribe today. You can also find me on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, also at the home front, Twitter, X, all of it at Reed Galen, Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen USA. Lee Drutman, thanks for joining me.
All right, thank you, Reed. Look forward to
Everybody else,
picking up the conversation again soon.
absolutely. Everybody else, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
All right, take care.